colleagues, it's really nice to be here so far from Finland. I have my presentation. There's 3 parts, so I will start with our history. The second part is movement, what happened in the 80s.
Louder also.
Louder.
Louder.
Louder, okay. And I have a lot of slides in this second part also, what is going current Woodcut life in Finland. And last part will be Japanese moku-hanga in Finland. So we can start. Okay, sorry about this sad looking image, but it's very important in printmaking history in Finland, because actually by this work our printmaking history started. It was woodcuts made by Kari Laitinen. So Kari Laitinen was very fond of this archaic expression, as well as for decorativeness in art, ukiyo-e and so on. And he had already learned about this method of woodcuts through continental art magazines before traveling to Berlin in 1895. To search new inspiration and study the Japanese woodcut of the exhibitions there. So after that trip, he made his first woodcut. And there's also a little bit sad story behind that, because his daughter died 5 years old. And this is related to his daughter dead also. But art historians is really underlining that printmaking history in Finland, starting this woodcut by this woodcut. Kari Laitinen was, of course, he was multi-talented artist and celebrated also as a creator or illustrator. Illustrator is not the right word, but the national epic of Kalevala. Here's a couple of images about these Kari Laitinas. I don't mention on these slides woodcuts, but if there's some exceptions, then it's mentioned. So everything will be woodcut. Just to show quickly this, how he was the painter, or making paintings about this symbolism and national epic Kalevala painting system. One talent of actually Kari Laitinen was ukiyo-e. So in that time they were not studying in art schools, printmaking was not existing in art school program at all. But these colleagues to colleagues, so actually Kari Laitinen teachers to ukiyo-e. And ukiyo-e made mostly intaglio and some symbolistic woodcuts. Simperi was an original artist who liked portray devils and other fantasy figures, but with warmth and human sympathy. And the devils were only making the duties. Belongs to the life. Main production ukiyo-e actually had intaglio and watercolor painting, and also one dome search, very interesting. And well, Kalle Kaaset was symbolist, so it goes forward. And he was influenced about German expressionism and made illustration, and for a short time also black and white woodcuts. But he's much more well known for his colorful and lyrical landscapes, which had their roots in the old Japanese woodcut tradition. It's quite obvious to see these things. Okay, let's go a little bit more colorful prints now, because in addition to the movement exploring national themes, there was another movement originated Ellen Tesla. Actually, she was one of the first female printmakers in Finland, but worked as a painter. like all the other artists also were painters and were involved in painting somehow. Tesla made her first woodcuts in Florence, where she was studying printmaking under English artist and theorician Edward Gordon Gray, stage designer and actor, as well as a pioneer in modern woodcuts. In most all her 200 works, Tesla portrays human figures and Italian landscape, mainly in Florence. Tesla began to use thin plywood on which she sketched her design in charcoal and only cut the necessary lines. The rest that followed was sheer painting. All colors were painted and printed at the same time. She was spontaneous, colorist who refused to obey all kinds of rules in printmaking. Good woman, yes. She would draw color not only on the surface on the block, but also on the bottom of the grooves, and might also print by stepping over the block on the floor. So spontaneous, yes. But in this sense, Tesla's woodcuts can be considered as a montage. And this kind of, well, actually, his painting, he's a painter of light, so to say. But 200 woodcuts he made. Then these two gentlemen who are kind of national property and very, very kings. One of the first ones will Askola, and he was making these Finnish landscapes and black and grey, and it's good to see these concentrate to see these grey shades here, because this kind of printing technique by using brush and oil printing is unique in the world. I have never seen anywhere else this kind of thing. So, and so Erkki Tanttu is the other one. He also made a lot of illustrations and so on, and was very famous in Finland. I showed shortly this technique, how is it made, this brushing technique, so you can read it here. And because of war, only black ink was possible in that time to get, so to make these grey shades, they ink all the blocks with black, and then these grey shades, grey tones, they use brush, not touching the paper. And there was silk tissue over that, how they control the strength of this grey tone. And it's really working only this thin, translucent Japanese paper, like Inosu. So also in Finland has been used these brushes, only in Japan, quite early. Okay. And another artist who also walks her own roads has done Ellen Tesla. Few decades is Ina Colliander. Colliander born in St. Petersburg and moved to Helsinki to study art. Colliander made her first woodcuts on palm pieces of wood from seaside or from forest. These early works already manifested the central features of her art, the skillful utilization of the grain and outline, as well as certain kind of primitiveness, the gross drawing of monk and organic. Like Tesla's technique, Colliander also was also rather unique. She only used a knife, hence the expressive cut lines in her works. In addition, she printed on color works from a single block like this. But something remarkable also happened here. Kolianen first did her works in black and white, but began to make color in the 50s. And thanks to all achievements in graphic art, printmaking particularly, Kolianen was chosen to represent Finland in Venice Biennale 1960. This also contributed to the prestige of Finland. So we are proud about Kolianen. Okay. These angels were quite typical and very archaic symbol. Just to show how we have organized our associations, Printmakers Association. What is noticeable here is that these guys started 1941 to collect old collection. Principle was each one would keep one print from each edition to common collection. And that's where it started to grow up. And it's now something 5,000 prints. It's much larger collection than any museum. So, Association of Finnish Printmakers, there's a website, also a website in English. Erkki Herva, a grand old man of Finnish woodcut in his time. He was also influenced by informants for a while. A trip to Japan in the 70s, however, opened his eyes for the new ways of expression. He was the Finnish artist to adopt Japanese woodlock technique, including this focus operation methods. Erkki Herva became the woodcut teacher at the institution known at the time the School of Industrial Arts in Helsinki, nowadays the University of Art, Arts, Design and Architecture. And almost all contemporary woodlock printmakers in Finland were his students. So at the end of the 70s he started to teach also Japanese woodcut. Herva described himself as a woodcut painter, but unlike Tesla or Oleander, Herva was a versatile master of the technique. He was fascinated and inspired by the tradition and craft of woodcut, and found the combination of old technique and contemporary expression channels. So, when he retired, I received his post and have been teaching now for 2 years, and in the end of 80s, beginning of 90s, I separate Western and Japanese woodcut and running both courses in our university. And students really love Japanese one. Well, 60s informalists spread from all over Europe, mainly to their paintings, but also some prints. Well, 70s was very tight in so that in printmaking certain things were allowed to do and certain things were not allowed to do. We younger generations started to fight against this kind of attitude, and so the movement started in the beginning of 80s. So we had a long-lasting tradition, exhibition of the year. It was organized every year and it has continued 120 years. It was Zurich. And in that time prints were quite small and quite grey looking, and they were displayed on that art hall in the dark corridor or displayed on the table. And with my colleague, Tapani Mikkonen, suddenly died 2004, got a message in dinner in Tokyo conference. He's passed away. We decided that we have to make a bigger size and we have to put the prints to the wall. like paintings and the other. So easy. So we make much bigger woodcuts, and especially in woodcut was starting this, then followed other ones later. But we start. So, of course, we can see here also the Japanese influence, but this Japanese work as well. So, our generation wanted to make some changes for this practice, and we did. And 80s, if I could describe some words, it's individualism, no rules, big size, everything is possible, somehow effective to the art around in 80s. So it was very kind of freedom and very creative. So I have to also show my movement because I took part in this movement also. I visited in this Vilho Askola and Erkki Tanttu and told them that I am starting to use power tools, and they were telling that it's against the wood, to destroy the wood and so on, but it's made by Black and Tech. Then I was angry young man and was against editions, so I wanted to make unique. So I made these kind of acrylic boxes. And most of these time of the prints were, so stage show like this. The different ministries. Okay, let's go forward. What happened here in Finnish woodcut in 80s was that this lady here, Professor Kari Laitinen, very nice works in Jyväskylä printmaking center, and it affected especially to the female woodcuts in Finland. A lot of color came, yes, and so on. So one example is here. And he's using one-pot methods and printing by lithography. This expressionist Eva Tiisala is making large-scale woodcuts. I used to describe that he has this kind of very sensitive and nervous drawing line. Quite effective, only using one color. Anu Vertanen is a very great renewed woodcuts in Finland, using also partly Japanese and Western. What then happened, this new generation, is that they start to make also installations. What reward is in print of art, American magazine. Jana Paulus is one of these born in 60s. This younger generation are stepping forward very strongly. They are very individualist and very product. Maybe some similarity to the symbols here as well. Antti Tanttu, he was working also as a professor in Finland some years ago, but his technique is so that he is printing one shapes to the translucent thin paper and mounting to the canvas, and then continue by paint. And that's why they are doing. Keito Nagasaki. This is quite nice looking. Sense of humor he's using, sometimes making also comics and mixing the intaglio. Very nice way and very creative she is. Eli Kurunsa, one of our exhibitions, now we are 70s here, so Peltonen is young man, also narrative cuts, so to say. Kari Peltonen is also quite talented.
I'm sorry, the interpreter is not able to hear you. Could you speak just a little
Okay.
louder?
Kari Peltonen is one of this young generation who is using these same thin papers and then mounting to the canvas. Continue public. This is quite interesting work, this Yuri, and this blurry feelings here that he's using several thin papers, these translucent Japanese papers, and each one is some color, and then putting them to the color, combining together, and it's very blurry, but not picture is seen that there's quite special depth side. We won with these works in this mini print triangle in Finland, these international ones. And so they are doing installation as well. Woodcut is going to be the wall in this form now, and also box diagrams is a fire. Okay, Japanese moku-hanga in Finland. So I already mentioned this Erkki Herra. So he traveled really in the 70s to Japan and started to teach this technique. First in demonstrating as part of this Western Woodcut, and time to time give private courses also different places in Finland. But he studied by himself this technique. I don't know how. I was supposed to meet him a month before. We agreed that I will come 1 month later on to see and interview these things, but he suddenly died. So. Inari Grun is making intaglio and using this bokashi effect. So it's works. Anna Vertanen is also using this watercolor Woodcut, Finnish moku-hanga. We know all, yes. So, not too quick. I made these Woodcut 2014, my exhibition. Here's combination of Japanese moku-hanga, so I started something 4 layers with watercolor Woodcut and then overprint by oil pasting. It's kind of tempera painting first and then oil painting. It gives certain depth in somehow. It's hard to, difficult to define how deep it is and so on. What is it? And using also this mica powders. This last exhibition I have just closed in September, and I'm using this mica powder, so it's my way to try to fence void. So here is mica powder, light gold. These are a little poor quality my own photos, because my photographer I didn't have time to copy. So this we have been cooperating with Japanese masters different years, invited them and served to the Fine Art Academy. I think we find quite many familiar names. And then we found Finnish Woodcut Art Society. So Finland is the promised land of associations. If there's one issue, we used to have 2 associations. So it was. But our main artist association of Finland is now 150 years old, so we have very long tradition. And then we have painters as separate, sculptors as separate, and then printmakers as separate. And then when video and performance came, then they found an association with others. Okay.